The analog heat plus effects is an often overlooked, and I also think misunderstood, hardware effect. And in this video, I want to explain why. The analog heat plus effects is actually the third iteration of the original analog heat, which came out in 2016. And I remember exactly what the response was. Back then, everyone was kind of surprised because Elektron was well known for their drum machines and synthesizers, mainly the machine drum, the mono machine, and the Octatrack. That was their big starting point as a company, and everyone was raving about those machines. And to come up with a new idea, for that matter, an analog effects unit such as the analog heat, was a bold move. And back then, not many people were a friend of the analog heat. Many people thought it was too expensive and it wasn't adding that much value. There was a minute group of people that really enjoyed the analog heat, myself included. But it was a very bold move nonetheless. I have to say, I am kind of surprised that there is a third iteration, because from what I have seen online, you know, if you look at the reviews and what people are using in their setups, the analog heat never was a success. So to see that there was a Mark II and now an analog heat plus effects really surprised me a lot. But I'm happy that they made the analog heat plus effects, because I actually think it's the best version of the analog heat. Just like with the previous versions of the analog heat, the analog section remains the center of attention. And the analog section consists of this character module, which lets you choose between 8 different types of saturation. And you start out with a clean boost, and when you go clockwise, you get more aggressive types of saturation. So rough crunch, classic distortion, round fuzz, and high gain. And usually the more you go to these sections, the more aggressive they are sounding. And you start out with a clean boost, saturation, enhance, and mid-drive. And these are more kind of like the subtle types of saturation and distortion modules, but you can enhance that even with the drive section below that. So you can use the enhance mode, for example, and start out with the drive mode and even get more saturation out of that subtle module. And then you have next to that a level potentiometer, which gives you the possibility to compensate for level changes. Next to that is the mix, so you can even do parallel processing within the analog heat. there is the equalizer section, and the equalizer section is a lovely two-band equalizer with really smooth curves. So you have a low band and a high band. And especially for round 808 types of kick drums, I love the equalizer low band. This is just a smooth curve that gives you a lot of subtle but great round sounding equalization. Underneath that we have the filter section, and the filter section consists of different filters. So we have a 24 dB low pass, then a 12 dB low pass, then we have a band pass, different sections of high pass, and we have 2 notch filters which allow you to even get into the nitty-gritty with some traditional phasing effects. We have, of course, a frequency control, which means the cutoff, and we have a resonance control. And everything that you see here can be modulated by either by LFOs or envelope followers or stuff like that. You can even use the external CV inputs to modulate those parameters. So this is a lot of stuff going on under the hood inside the analog kit. So the analog heat effects is as the name suggests, analog distortion plus saturation unit, and that has now also digital effects. And that's where I think many people misunderstood the concept of the newer generation of Elektron gear. Because Elektron is now breaking up the barriers between analog and digital. If you think of the Syntakt is a drum machine that has analog instruments and digital instruments that you can mix together, and you can use analog compression, analog saturation, digital effects such as delays and many other effects. And if you think about this concept, that means a lot of AD and DA conversion. So analog to digital and digital to analog conversion. I have spoken to some of the developers of Elektron at the last Super Booth about this, and I said, hey, why haven't you spoken about the genius concept of the Syntakt and the analog heat effects? Because I guess that there is a lot of things going on under the hood. And one of the developers told me, yeah, they are packed. And that's the reason why they are getting so hot as well. So the Syntakt can get quite hot. And that is because there are a lot of amps and converters inside that need to do constant conversion and processing. Think about it again. You have analog and digital instruments. They need to come at the exact same time when it comes to the mixing part, because if you don't do that, you have latency issues, you have phasing, you have cancelling out of frequencies. So under the hood of the newer Elektron devices, there's a lot of going on in terms of sample accurate playback and processing. And that's where I think Elektron missed the mark when it came to the marketing, because that should be highlighted. That's really, really cool. And the same is true for the analog heat effects. Think about it. You have an analog section, the saturation and distortion section that is called heat, and pre and post that section, you can route digital effects, of course. That is not so important when you are on the digital realm, in a digital world. But to blend and mix that with an analog effects section is really, really, really cool. You go into the analog heat effects, and then you have your synthesizer and you want to use the delay. Well, then you need an AD, so it becomes an analog signal that is converted into a digital signal, and that is then brought back into the analog world once you are going into the heat section of the analog heat effects. And if you want to use then a reverb or anything else like the Warble, After the heat section, that means there is another AD and DA process before it goes out of the analog heat effects or into Overbridge. That's a lot of conversion. That means the conversion needs to be absolutely spot on, and also the sample accuracy needs to be top notch, because other than that, everything else will sound not good. You will have smearing of transients, you will have a very strange phasing sound sometimes, and nothing is happening here. So kudos to Elektron for building such a great device that has such an ingenious concept and matrix built inside. The flow page shows you the signal path of the analog heat plus effects, and that has a lot going for it. So not only do we have now the heat section, which is the traditional analog effects section, but you have different types of effects which you can add on top of that. So like I said, this is a lot of clever engineering that is happening here, because essentially what this means is you have digital effects which can be put pre or post the analog section, which means a lot of AD and DA conversion. I won't go through all the effects because there are so many reviews where you can see everything, but let me show you a few of my favorites. So you have a great Bitcrusher. That is lovely, makes a whole lot of sense if you have pads that need more like those dirty kind of rough edges from old samplers. Especially beautiful is the filter, so I can do pre or post filtering before and after the heat section. There's such a lot of cool things happening. Then there is this warble effect, which I love to death because it's like it simulates kind of like tape, like cassette decks, where you would have very small pitch changes depending on the speed of the tape, and this is so cool because if you are into lo-fi kind of sounds, especially like lo-fi hip hop or lo-fi types of house music, this is great on pads. Gives you very smooth sounding but also wide sounding pads. And not only can you control the noise level like you could do with a traditional cassette deck, you can also enhance the stereo width. So there's a lot of stuff under the hood. And mind you, most of those parameters that you have here can be modulated by LFOs or the envelope follower and stuff like that. So this is a very complex machine. One of the other things that I really like is the delay. I'm a sucker for delays because I'm into dub music, and dub is centered around the delay effect. And this delay gives me a lot to play around with. Not only do I have a very cool representation of the time based settings of the delay, but I can also set it to a normal delay or a ping pong delay, and I can control the width of the delay. So if I'm in a traditional single delay mode, then width becomes my panning, and if I'm in the ping pong mode, then I can set the stereo width of those panned delays. And of course, feedback controls as well. And this already is dub to its core, but it gets even greater because we now have also a cool filter section that lets you set the filtering of the delay effect. So I can make really thin kind of sounding delay effects, great for dub, techno, or I can make it very wide and open kind of sounding delays, great for older styles of dub or reggae, where you would have tape deck kind of like delays, and they weren't able to filter the delay inside the machine, but what they had to do was then use a filter, an analog filter or an EQ in the auxiliary chain in order to make it sound in a special way. One thing I forgot to mention is Overbridge. And Overbridge is a really complete software that allows you to control all Elektron devices, which I don't use. I have to be honest, I used Overbridge once in 2017, back then when I had my Mac Pro, the cheese grater, and there were some incompatibilities between the analog keyed, the original analog keyed, and the Intel chip that was built into the Mac Pro, so I couldn't use Overbridge with the analog keyed back then. And that's why I never used it. I think it's time now to take another look at Overbridge. Many people really enjoy it, and yeah, so if you would like to see a review of Overbridge, let me know, but at this point I haven't used Overbridge, and the point for analog outboard gear for me is to use it with my hands, so I'm not a fan of software and VSTs when it comes to hardware, but I could see a potential use case when I wanted to use it in the DAW for automation, for example. But honestly, I get a little bit stressed out because if I would use Overbridge in my DAW sessions, that would also mean that there is a constant stream between the USB port and the controller of the analog keyed, and they are talking to each other all the time while I'm doing my mixing, and I think this could lead up to some problems in terms of latency or playback. So I'm a little bit stressed out when it comes to that topic and just thinking about it. Let me know if you have had other experiences with Overbridge, and I think I will try it out. But at this point, I was never a fan of such a setup. But yeah, I think I'll give it a try. All right, that is my review of the Elektron Analog Keyed Plus effects. I think it's one of the best creative hardware effects to date. I love the character of the distortion. I love the filter. I just adore the smooth equalizer that gives you a lot of creamy richness once you have, really round drums, or, something that needs a little bit more curvature or something like that. I love it. It's really cool. And with all the modulation capabilities, it is just simply one of the most creative effects out there. Try it out and learn how you can incorporate it into your setup. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about the Elektron Heat Plus effects, let me know in the comment section below. And if you would like to see a separate video about Overbridge, let me know that in the comments as well. See you in the next video.